Cricket et al. It's a website, it's a podcast.
Pete, it's a way of life.
It's Gideon over here.
Peter Lawler here.
And welcome to Cricket et al., your independent cricket podcast, coming to you from the Gabba on an eventful, interrupted, somewhat truncated, but utterly absorbing day of Test cricket, the fourth of this third Test. And things are nicely poised, aren't they? Nicely poised. India has managed to creep past the follow-on. In some ways rampage past the follow-on after a fine stand between just Bumrah and Akashdeep. And Test match is now in danger of flaring out. But we have seen some fantastic cricket today, Peter Lawler. Wouldn't you agree?
It was an amazing day of cricket. It was just amazing. It was exhausting. It seems to last a lifetime. I feel like this Test has lasted.
We're just not used to 5-day Test matches anymore, are we?
No, but with early starts and on and off for rains and so many twists and turns. I mean, I arrived this morning thinking that the only thing that stood between Australia and winning this Test match could be the weather. I really didn't think that India could rally. I looked at that pitch. It actually looked to have grown grass and got greener overnight. I wandered out and had a look. There were cracks in very alarming places on the wicket, just outside the right-handed batter's off stump here at the Vulture Street end, and there was a long one leading up to middle stump on a good length at the Stanley Street end. We'd seen the ball do some pretty alarming things yesterday and thought, hey-ho, away we go. They are going to really just tear through what's left of this Indian first innings. They were 4 down. But then Josh Hazlewood left the warm-up, walked over to the physio and I think to Coach Andrew McDonald, and then headed off the field rather than onto the field, and actually didn't take the field for the first 2 overs. Josh Inglis took his place. So, well, that's a bit curious.
He had reported calf awareness.
Yeah,
Pete.
well, I was getting to that because he had then came back out onto the field and bowled the over before the drinks break. His first ball was slow and wayward. And you thought, oh dear, what's going on there? The physio came out with the drinks. And then Josh Hazlewood left the ground with the physio. Of course, we all became very alarmed about that and started bombarding the dressing room for asking for reports. The first report was that it's not a side strain. Let's just get that clear. Not that they're defensive down there or by any means. But it turned out that, in fact, it was a calf strain. He'd been taken off for scans, and it's a serious calf strain, which is essentially putting
It's the side of the calf.
It is the side of the calf strain, and he's out of the series. Now, that has an enormous impact. Well, that obviously was going to impact what was going to happen for the rest of the day. I mean, Stark and Cummins were going to have to bowl all the overs.
And just to elaborate further, of course, Hazlewood missed the last Test match and has replaced a fully fit bowler, Scott Boland, coming into this game. And, of course, all the King's horses and all the King's men before this series were dedicated to getting Australia with their first choice attack and guaranteeing their selection for the whole of the series. And Josh Hazlewood has now left Australia severely undermanned in testing conditions. It's tough out there for fast bowlers trying to prosecute their advantage. And unfortunately, you could see in the last hour of today just how hard Stark and Cummins had worked. They really were running on fumes towards the end. I don't think I've ever seen Cummins look so sweaty and red-faced and puffing as he got through his last spell. He bowled terrifically well today. It was a manful performance from Australia's attack, but they were obviously towards the end short-handed.
Yeah, look, the multiple interruptions for rain, which are so frustrating and frustrated us throughout this match, actually played to Australia's advantage to some degree because obviously they got a chance to go off, be massaged and come back on. Had there not been rain delays, I think they would have been in a hell of a lot more trouble. Yeah. To some degree, it's played into Australia's hand. And then by the time they somehow won their way back into the match and had India 9 down and well short of the follow-on, and you thought, Oh, goodness. This is a pretty compelling position that Australia finds itself in.
Yeah, I mean, in hindsight, we might actually have seen the crucial stroke of the match from the very first ball, which of course Rahul was trying to let go from Cummins. He nicked it to first slip. I'd been watching. Hadn't been watching Hazlewood in the warm-ups. Maybe I should have been, but I've been watching Smith during the warm-ups. He probably took 50 slip catches in the with the fielding coach nicking them, and some difficult ones. He didn't put one down, that's for sure. He was looking very, very sure-handed, and he took one. It was an awkward height. It probably came a little bit slower than he expected. He couldn't quite decide which way to put his hands, up there, down there, and he shelled it. And that was Rahul on 33, and he's gone on to get 82, and he's batted most of that first session. It would have been, if you'd been able to get number 7 in straight away this morning, we might have a different tale to tell. In the end, Smith's taken a fantastic catch to get rid of Rahul just before lunch. Brilliant anticipation going to his right off line. But by dropping the simple one, he set Australia back. We didn't know how much at that point, but it's probably turned out to be a pretty crucial intercession.
Yes, it has. And so it came down to that 9th wicket, and what a compelling bit of cricket that was. And strange enough, almost everybody had left the stadium by then. I think there was like 6,700 odd people came through the turnstiles. I'd be surprised if there were 700 here for what essentially turned out to be the most compelling bit of cricket I've seen this series.
It was a great last hour, wasn't it? Because Cummins had come back with Stark, and they'd broken a stubborn stand between Nindish Kumar Reddy and Ravi Jadeja. Cummins bowled Reddy with a beautiful delivery, kind of a tentative stroke, but just the kind of wicket that Cummins gets. You know, he gets that breakthrough when Australia need it most. He bombed Jadeja, put a man back. Mitchell Marsh took a very nice catch at deep backward square leg. It looked as though the momentum was with Australia because the Indian tail is a pretty long one. So we ended up Akash deep. We'd not seen him bat before, but he can hold one. He can hold a stick.
Bats pretty well, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Jasper Bumrah defended stubbornly, and the crowd was small, but it was vociferous in that last hour, wasn't it? The Indian contingent had remained. The conch shell was still in action. There was great enthusiasm for every run, and it's ended up that India has avoided the follow on.
Got there on their hands and knees over the line, and 2 balls later, Akash deep. Sweet release.
Yeah.
Launched an incredible six.
Absolutely pongoed it towards the Cricketers Club.
Yeah.
And then, even more surprising, the umpires take us off for light.
Fuck me. Cricket's a dumb game. Seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, what the fuck? He's just hit a 6 against Pat Cummins. And we walk off.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think the Australians were probably happy to walk off at that point. I think they were done.
They were looking in some
sure
distress.
were.
Yeah.
Couple of things going on, I reckon. The fitness of Cummins and Stark was really on display today. I mean, it wasn't the hardest day's work you would have, but that is the advantage of the breaks that they were given ahead of this series to work on their fitness. I suppose you could counter that argument by saying, well, what about Josh Hazlewood? What about Josh Hazlewood? Really, is this becoming an issue? He over the last 4 or 5 years, he's missed a hell of a lot. In fact, he's played less than half the available tests.
17 out of 35.
Yeah. He's missed the last one. Maybe even before we get to Hazlewood. I mean, have the selectors and the fitness staff made a mistake by playing him in this test match? They'll argue that they haven't because it's a different injury.
They're being very emphatic about the idea that he was absolutely rock solid, 100% fit coming into this game, which is kind of belied by the fact that he's sustained an injury in the warm-ups.
Yeah, well, you know, and you never are 100% fit, and you can't guarantee what happens. And look, and a side's not directly connected to a calf. But I guess that absolves them from that issue. And you could tell how defensive they were about such accusations almost from the moment that Hazlewood showed some
preemptively defensive, in fact. Defensive. Yeah, just in case any of you bastards are thinking of writing something.
Yeah, it was kind of like that. But I guess coming back to my original point there, he's a risk, Hazlewood, now, isn't he? I think his history, and we should have known this over the last 4 seasons or 5 seasons, his history tells us that he's not always going to get through a series or through a test match. He didn't play the World Test Championship final. He's broken down and he's missed tests in so many other series. Do we now select Josh Hazlewood with our heart in our mouth? He's a brilliant bowler. At his best, he busts his gut for Australia, and I have nothing but sympathy for his situation, because this must be rotten for a sportsman to go through this. Not only to go through this, but to go through it and know that you've let your mates down, and they are indeed very tight mates. In fact, I've sort of called them the Holy Trinity in the Cricket et al. Piece today. Subscribe, like, do all that stuff. There's the marketing section of the podcast covered, Gideon. Don't need to worry about that later. What was I saying before I went into
the Holy Trinity
pitch? Yeah, the Holy Trinity. They are almost 3 bowlers in one. They're such a unit. I think that they demand that when possible they all play together. Perhaps he would have been given the Melbourne Test off. Who knows? But the upside is that Scott Boland will play at the MCG. The Melbourne people are going to be very excited after that, after what he provided in his debut test. What was it? 6 or 7?
6 or 7, yeah.
Something like that. Whether he even backs up for another test after that's a question mark too, because I think there's some sort of doubts about whether he's a 2 tests in a row type player.
Yeah.
They'll bring other people into the squad. Well, they've got Doggett and they've got Abbott around and about. So I'm not sure if they're still in the squad or not, but they've left themselves open to bringing somebody else in.
Yes.
Who that is, I'm not sure. Maybe it's that Fraser guy.
Fergus O'Neill?
Fergus.
I like Fergus O'Neill.
Yeah, I haven't met him.
Well, I like him as a bowler. I like his method, and it would be a hometown pick. If you were looking to the future, Boland will definitely do a job for you, but I think every time you pick a fast bowler in their 30s, you are taking a certain risk. Hazlewood has a lot of miles on the clock as a bowler. Strangely, this summer he hasn't bowled very much at all. In the last 78 days, he's bowled 40 test overs, 24 first-class overs and 7 ODI overs. So you could not say that he's succumbed from overwork.
No.
This resting or this load management was meant to ease his path into the series. And you have to think that maybe it's worked the opposite way. That maybe he wasn't fit enough to bowl here. Maybe he wasn't as match hardened as he should be. Look, there'll be all manner of speculation about this. We do know that over the last 4 or 5 years, Hazlewood has, well, as you say, he's missed a lot of cricket. He's also broken down in Test matches. And one of the problems with cricket is that you can't substitute an injured player. If you've got an injured player, you have to carry him. You have to play with 10 men.
It's not a game of footy, is it?
It's not a game of footy. So it is paramount that a player be guaranteed to get through 5 days. These days, I guess a lot of Test matches end early. And it's a good way to manage your management if you're winning Test matches in 2.5 days, like Australia did in Adelaide.
Well, I've written in the piece today that when I got back from Adelaide, the last. And did we fly back on the 4th day? Yeah, we must have, because we played the 3rd day.
Yeah.
4th day, I had an appointment for a radio interview the minute I got home. I really wasn't looking forward to it, and I picked up the phone and they said, "So, what's your opinion on 5-day tests?" And apparently, all day, there had been arguments raging about what a waste of time the 5-day test is. Right. And surely cricket should get its shit together and compound it all into 4 days. And, hey, you only had to look at the last 2 tests, 2.5 days, and I'm sure there's much more evidence for it. But I feel like ringing back now and saying, come back to me about that 5-day business. Guys,
Well, ideally here we'd like a 6-day test, wouldn't we?
We would.
That would guarantee a finish.
Timeless test, although, God, it has felt like a timeless test. God.
I can remember when they first envisaged the World Test Championship final, that they were talking about it being a timeless game.
Were they?
I reckon that was Haroon Lagat's original proposal, that you have a timeless game.
Do they have a day in reserve?
Wouldn't that be fascinating?
Do
I think they would have a day in reserve for sure, but because of the imperative of actually getting a result and not wanting to give the championship to the higher placed team in the event of a draw, that you had to play until one team prevailed and the other one fell over.
Well, James Sutherland, chief executive, whose reign sort of stretched across decades in Australian cricket, he was an advocate of the 4-day test.
He was.
But to play the and part of the argument that they have to play the 4-day test is you're going to bowl, 110 overs in a day. How the hell are you going to do that? They can't bowl 80 half the time. You look at sides like England and even India here, and often Australia. Getting in the required overs is very difficult, and you'd have to start earlier. And here in Brisbane, where there's no daylight saving, and in a match which is officiated by people who don't trust the lights and won't play under lights when it gets gloomy, I don't know how you're going to do it.
Maybe in the event of a sort of a 110-day 110 over day, you could allow injury substitutions. Because you are likely to incur injuries in a longer day, aren't you? Maybe that's a way of accommodating it. Maybe you have a squad of 12, from which 11 play at any one time. Yeah, and you have a reserve batter and a reserve bowler.
I love that. I love forcing sides to take that game. It's 5 days. Yeah. If you get trapped out there without a bowler, bad bloody luck. That's just the way cricket rolls, Maybe you learn a lesson from it. Maybe you don't. I mean, it does have a terrible impact on the course of a match if a bowler breaks down in the first innings. Not so much if it's a batter. But so be it. That's the way tests have always rolled. I'm a traditionalist. I'm not for change.
We don't deal well with change on this pod, do we?
Very aggravated.
We know that about each other.
Yeah.
What else have we seen today, Pete? Well, we did see Rohit Sharma. Briefly,
you've written about this. On Cricket et al.
Continuing his rather insecure form of recent days. His last 7 Test matches, he's averaging 11. He's made 1 half century, and frankly, today he did not look like getting any further than he did. In fact, he was probably lucky to last as long as half an hour. He nicked a inside edge one for 4. He was beaten regularly outside the off stump. His footwork isn't going anywhere. He's never been a huge mover towards the ball, but he is now relying on his hands to get him out of trouble with his immobile feet. Got a classic 2-card trick today. Cummins bowled him a short one. He kind of fanned at it. Next ball was that little bit fuller, that length that Rohit doesn't quite come all the way forward to. It was on a 5th stump. Really, he couldn't do anything else but nick it. It wasn't a run-scoring stroke. It's the kind of shot that you go to when you just need bat on ball. Rahul had been leaving beautifully at the other end. He was an example of exactly how to play on this pitch. But when Rohit went today, it looked suspiciously foreordained. Even at number 6, he's struggling now. Now, I expressed some surprise yesterday, I think, that he didn't go back to the top of the order in this game, sort of on a kill or cure basis. But if it's going to be awkward for India if they are carrying their captain at number 6, because already they look underdone with their bowling. I think like they could do with an extra bowler. Reddy is not quite good enough as a second seamer, but he's probably good enough to bat number 6 or number 7.
Well, having that depth in the batting line paid off today.
It did.
Rohit's situation fascinates me. I mean, I don't know what goes on in the guy's head. I don't know what goes on in my own head half the time. But he's he's endured the indignity of a clean sweep under his stewardship against New Zealand. That's never happened before to an Indian captain or an Indian cricket side. He's missed the first test because he stayed at home for the birth of his child, and he's been rocking the baby when the side has won in Perth. And what else would you rather be doing? In fact, I'd rather be at home right now because Amara, the greyhounds at my house, and I'm going to go home and see Amara. But returning to it, he comes back. They lose again, so that's 4 successive losses as a captain.
Yes.
He comes here and they are in deep doo-doo pretty early on. And as you say, his form with the bat has not been good. I think he's averaging. You said
it's 11.
Good number.
It's 11 over the last 7 tests.
Yeah, and I think I had him at about 23 over the last 12 months, which is not good. He's 37.
37. Yeah.
At that age, I'm starting to wonder if his mind's wandering off to greener pastures. There's a kid at home.
Well,
there's a wife at home. He's
that's
only
true.
recently
That's
married.
True. Yeah.
He's long in the tooth. The game's getting harder. I don't think he's going to have much choice about whether he goes on as captain. I think his hand will be forced in that matter. But I don't know what he's thinking, and maybe he's going to play for the next 20 years and he'll be a 57-year-old Test cricketer.
Look, the other thing to cast your mind back to is, earlier this year he did win a tournament. He did win the T20 World Cup, and he dominated. He played an inspirational innings in the Super 8s at Gross Islet.
But this is Test match cricket we're talking
This
about
is
here.
Test match cricket,
Yeah,
but he's a captain. But he's captain in all formats, and he's the leader of his country. And of course, we saw all those pictures of huge parades afterwards, and being felicitated by Narendra Modi. And if anything is calculated to sort of get you to play on that bit longer, it's the desire to hear that applause again. Australia is not the place to come to for that 1-2 or too many.
It is. Yeah, and this feels like a 2 or too many for him. I do love felicitations. I
like felicitations too.
About a woman called Felicity who's in charge of felicitations. It's a wonderful Indian word. Well, it's an English word, but it seems to only exist on the subcontinent.
Yes.
Yeah, you don't hear it much here, do you?
Have you been felicitated in India, Pete? I certainly have been, actually. I've been felicitated. It's a very charming experience.
I know where the grade cricketer go with that, but I'm not going to. Hi, Sam. Hi, here you go.
So at that point, I mean, I think India were like 4 for 5 for, I think, at that stage.
When he was out.
Jadeja was coming in.
I guess too long ago to remember.
And, it really looked as though Australia were unbackable. They had 445 on the board.
Yep.
India were well in arrears. So in the end, they've done well to fight their way out of that corner. They have shown some backbone. They've shown some character. Australia's been caught a little bit short of resources, just stretched that little bit thin. It's an attritional test match in demanding conditions. The interruptions, as you say, have played both ways. Not for us. They've been a pain in the arse for us. But they test a player's concentration, and they can interrupt momentum. There were stages at Australia today when you would have thought Australia would love to have stayed on the field.
Were you at the point of giving up on it at any point?
I was, yeah. I popped off this afternoon. I popped off. I just thought, I can't stay in this press box any fucking longer.
I know how you feel. I know how you feel.
I'm going bonkers here just staring at the covers.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to, I popped off down to the State Library of Queensland to look at some primary source material that I'd ordered a little bit earlier in the test match that I hadn't been able to get around to looking at. But don't worry.
Did you plan to return?
I stayed in touch with the test match and I went, that sounds interesting. I'm going back.
Yeah. I didn't blame you. I didn't blame you for heading to the library. It seemed like a much better place. I wish I could have come with you. It was a beaut. There's a lot of fun in today's cricket. There are a lot of things. I mean, the KL Rahul innings was great. Jadeja's innings was great.
Yeah.
That 10th wicket partnership, sorry. Was it the 10th wicket partnership? Yeah. The last one has been fantastic. We saw that Smith catch, great catch.
Yeah.
Bison out on the prairie, as Simon Kadich said, what really good catch, and he's taken 3 catches in this test match, 2 of them very good. And then Alex Carey's catch in front of first slip, that was a ripper.
To get rid of Siraj, terrific catch.
Ripper.
Yep. So if you'd stayed at the Gabba this afternoon, you would have seen some great cricket.
Well, I did.
And I'm certainly glad that I came back for it.
I did. I was running from TV cross to radio, cross to TV, cross to radio. Oh, yeah.
You're looking a bit fatigued, Pete. I need to take you home. All right. Well, in that case, that's all we've got time for on Cricket et al. Thank you very much for your company. We'll be back here tomorrow evening. But in the meantime, it's goodbye from me.
And it's good night from him.